Who else do we have join us? Mark? Maribel? Anybody else, Reese? We're all set? All right. Well, thank you all. And appreciate the opportunity to update folks on where we are in the state and where we're going. As many of you know, we're battling a number of high-profile fires in this state, but many of you may not be aware that we have put down over 330 fires just in the last 20 hours. Those 330 fires directly touched our statewide operations here, not only at the Operation Center, but the work that Tom Porter, Chief Porter, and his team at Cal Fire have suppressed. I put that to put this moment in perspective. I recognize this moment generates a tremendous amount of anxiety. The high-profile images that people see, not only the Kincaid fire in Northern California, but now the Getty fire in Southern California and Los Angeles, generate consternation, generate concern. But this, interestingly, is a moment in California that is very familiar. We've actually had a below-average fire season to date. What we're experiencing at the moment is slightly above average. It's a high end of average for this time of year. It doesn't feel that way, but it, in fact, is the case. This state has been well-resourced. The state has been very forthright in terms of pre-positioning assets to a degree that we had never have in the past. We've been able to put down some other high-profile fires, 2 in San Diego, a number of them in Southern California, specifically in Los Angeles, and over the last 24 hours throughout the Bay Area and parts of Northern California. I just want to say that to make this point. I could not be more proud of the men and women in uniform, folks not only working Cal Fire, CHP, the Office of Emergency Services, our health and human service agencies, but also local law enforcement, local sheriffs, local police, people from all walks of life, community leaders, volunteers that have stepped up in remarkable ways. And while we've had an evacuation in Northern California that includes roughly 180,000 people, I've had the opportunity to travel to the evacuation centers, to the shelters, and I've seen firsthand, I've witnessed the extraordinary collaborative effort that has been, I think, handled remarkably well. None of this is perfect. But I think the work that has been done in anticipation of this moment is paying real dividends. The backdrop, however, of this moment is exacerbated by these power shutoffs. Roughly 880,000 customers continue to be shut off. That said, we received from Pacific Gas and Electric, our northern most IOU, investor-owned utility. They have provided that all clear for all counties as early as 6 a.m. this morning. As you know, even after we get the all clear, we've got to go out and physically investigate these transmission and distribution lines. Rather than just relying on the assets and resources of Pacific Gas and Electric, the state has supplemented those resources with the California Highway Patrol and fixed-wing aircraft that was allowed to go by utilization of infrared technology and get up and move very expeditiously. Accordingly, we've used the National Guard and similar technology that is attached to their number of helicopters that we've provided as resource supplement to Pacific Gas and Electric. They've gone through the first phase of their investigations on the transmission lines. Now they're moving to the distribution lines to begin the process of re-energization over the course of the next number of hours, and we hope within the next 48 hours, 2 days, where that will be substantially complete. And I want to parse that by making the point substantially. There's no guarantees that all of that will be complete. You can caucus with PG&E directly about their procedures and protocols because, as you know, we're entering back into wind events later in the middle part of this week, and these things may actually coincide, and there may be some crossover related to that. There is a fire that has generated some attention in northern part of the state, in and around, particularly Ukiah area, Mendocino. We're getting our arms around that, Chief. I think you're 20+% contained on that fire. I think you feel pretty confident around that fire because the winds are beginning to settle down. Accordingly, the Kincaid fire, of which we now have over 4,100 personnel working on that Kincaid fire, it's now grown to over 66,000 acres. It remains at 5% containment, but it is a substantially bigger footprint. And so we're holding our own. And I want to just make this point, particularly holding our own in and around Healdsburg and Windsor. And I just, again, want to compliment the totality of the operation, not only as it relates to the hand crews that are out there, the number of dozer crews, the bulldozers that are out there on the ground, the folks holding the line around Windsor and around that 101 corridor to keep it on the east side without allowing spotting to happen on the west side of 101. I feel confident that they have operationally, I think, secured the perimeters around this fire in a way that gives me confidence moving forward. But I'm not naive about shifting winds, shifting conditions, and so we are putting all of our assets that we have on this fire, including getting the benefit of some of those assets from Southern California that have made their way up here, and the assets from out of state. Current number of engines that have come from out of state, total 105. I've had the privilege of thanking a number of governors, including Governor Brown up north. In Oregon, 75 engines she sent down. Governor Sisolak, who was in contact with her this morning from Nevada, governors of Montana, other governors that have sent equipment into the state of California. We have 45 additional engines that we anticipate coming into the state, but 105 through this, what we call EMAC partnership with the other states, are helping supplement our efforts as well. As it relates to the Getty fire, we are not the incident command, meaning the state. Local agencies are, and they feel that they have the support, at least based on the conversations we've had just moments ago with Mayor Garcetti and, of course, the team assembled behind me with their counterparts. But we are supplementing the aerial assets on the Getty fire. We've got 8 assets, including 3 DC-10s that are now available for suppression on that fire. And we feel that if necessary, we can easily and quickly get more assets down there. I want to just acknowledge the pre-positioning work that was done in and around that area that also aided in early mitigation. Another reason I'm very proud of the folks, again, standing behind me for their anticipatory framework this year. An historic amount of pre-positioned assets, strike teams that were assembled in and around these areas have proven to really have paid off in remarkable ways. Let me just say a few words, not only about these suppression efforts, but also about this moment. We're entering the peak part of fire season that is very familiar to Californians, but may not be as familiar to people living outside the state. Most folks think of peak fire season in the mid parts of the summer in California when those winds go up, the Santa Anas in the southern part of the state, the Diablo winds in the northern part of the state. This is, for us, peak fire season. I'll remind folks that last year, the Camp Fire and the Woolsey Fire, both in Northern California and Southern California, they occurred in that first week or so of November. And so that's why we are very vigilant at this moment. The winds are the most vexing and most complexing part of our suppression and prevention challenges. But the good news is the winds have died down in the last number of hours, and it's giving us a respite at the moment. And unlike yesterday and the day before, there was a lot of fire flaring up and down. Right now, at least as of the last hour and a half or two, Chief, things feel, relatively speaking, calm, despite those 330 fires that I noted looking in our rearview mirror over the last 24 hours. So we are vigilant. We are prepared. I want to thank all of our partners, local mutual aid, all of the partnerships for evacuation at the local level, and all the shelter work that's being done, particularly protecting our seniors. Mark Galley is here, our Health and Human Service Director. We've been focusing on those that need backup batteries, oxygen, working with local hospitals, been visiting a number of them, trying to make sure that they're providing adequate access to medications and to critical care equipment, dialysis equipment, fill in the blank. So that's where we are at the moment. We have provided a statewide emergency declaration, that statewide declaration, provides additional resources. Those include, but are not limited to, access to unemployment insurance, allows access to a series of efforts around mitigating concerns around fees and fines associated with deadlines, with taxes, both at the state franchise tax board, also related to accessing identification of the DMV, a series of protocols and procedures laid out in detailed term in that emergency declaration to help aid people in their recovery and address their anxiety in the short term. Those supplement the other declarations that were previously advanced both in Sonoma County and in Los Angeles County. And those are in addition to the statewide overlays, in addition to the 3 FMAGs that we have received, FMAG being the federal management assistance grants that we have been afforded by the Trump administration and FEMA. I want to again thank FEMA, thank the Trump administration for moving quickly to support those requests without hesitation. They have been extraordinary partners, and we look forward to continuing in that spirit of collaboration and that spirit of cooperation. So there are no resources we're wanting from the federal government, no resources that we are not trying to provide in real time to local government. And I again want to just compliment the extraordinarily talented men and women in uniform that are working their tails off without much sleep, that are doing everything they can to put down this Kincaid fire and that Getty fire and prepare for those winds that are starting to rise in Southern California, and the winds will make their way back here in Northern California in a few days. Final point, PUC is moving forward with a major investigation in the power shutoff protocols. The PUC will be making a series of announcements related to not only the investigation, but as it relates to supporting the application and implementation of the provisions that we set out in that landmark legislation we passed, referred to by those, at least in Sacramento, as AB 1054. I'll remind you, AB 1054 requires $5 billion of public safety investments by our 3 largest investor-owned utilities. $5 billion of public safety investments. It requires the Public Utilities Commission to set up a public safety division, of which they're required to do by January 1st. They have already hired the director of that public safety division, Carolyn Thomas Jacobs, and she is in the process of interviewing and hiring anywhere from 35 to 40 people. In that legislation, we planned, in anticipation of this moment, that we would also supplement that division with an advisory committee that would be supported not just through the executive branch and the Public Utilities Commission, also by recommendations of the California Legislature. That advisory committee includes the best and the brightest in data collection, weather analysis, technology, looking at grid strategies, best practices related to public safety, all with an eye on advancing our clean energy goals and modernizing our utility equipment and strategies as it relates to hardening, undergrounding, wiring, microgrids, and the like. So all of that is procedurally moving as it should, with a sense of deep urgency to meet this moment and to make sure that we mind these protocols and make sure we're minimizing these disruptions moving forward, and making sure PG&E in particular, but also the other investor-owned utilities, are held to account on meeting those protocols. The PUC is also looking to fine $100,000 a day per incident if those protocols are breached, as it relates to the commitments that are made by the 3 largest investor-owned utilities and our state officials. And the PUC will be aggressive in that major investigation and aggressive in enforcing those protocols. They have already opened a series of investigations, of which many of you are well familiar. They've been holding hearings all up and down the state, including one just 72 or so hours ago in Redding, California. They'll continue to be holding the investor-owned utilities to account. And I'll remind you that the legislation we passed, the plan that we are implementing to address these issues so they don't continue to occur, and this is not the new normal, include time compensation for executives and managers to public safety and public safety outcomes. That is already in place. In addition to that, it is already established that the boards of directors of these investor-owned utilities are also compelled to have public safety experts that work in concert with the Public Utilities Commission and have to go through a wildfire mitigation plan that has to be approved on an annual basis with a 3-year look forward, so that there's immediate strategy to address public safety, medium and long-term strategies. Those are requirements. That's part of our plan, and those are parts of the plan that are being implemented in real time that the Public Utilities Commission, with our new chair's leadership, will be scrutinizing in detail and with the kind of transparency that is afforded and required of this moment. So that's broadly it. I want to just close by making one final point. As it relates to scrutinizing those $5 billion of public safety improvements, we are going to be very aggressive, particularly the Public Utilities Commission, its new leadership, on making sure that all of those safety investments are measurable in immediate frame, looking 3, 6, 9 months out. And making sure 100% of the investments are being not made to infrastructure broadly defined, but public safety infrastructure specifically defined, so we can meet this moment head on and work our way not just through the next few weeks, peak fire season, but anticipate as we move into January, February, March, next year's fire season, and we're prepared in a way that we haven't been in the past. So that is a long-winded, broad strokes overview of where we are. I have not filled in every blank, and that's why we've brought folks here with me to supplement. And I want to ask Mark, who has, talk about the best and the brightest, they're right here. And Mark Yarducci, as you know, runs the Office of Emergency Services and has been leading and coordinating our efforts, and he will supplement some of my comments, and then we'll ask Chief Porter to come up and do the same as it relates to situations, as it relates on the ground, and give you some latest information, and happily then we'll answer any questions that you may have. Mark?
Thanks, Governor, and good morning. I'll keep my comments brief because I think Governor Newsom obviously extremely engaged and leading, providing direction, has provided a tremendous amount of detail to all of you about what's happening. Let me just start off, though, by talking about the governor's declaration of a statewide emergency that was issued yesterday. This is very, very significant in that it does a few things. It really does focus on the ability for all public entities, public safety, responders and state agencies to have all hands on deck as we deal with these complex situations that we're dealing with. This is weather conditions that have really moved throughout the entire state, red flag conditions with high winds. These are conditions that in itself, in a regional basis, we've seen and can deal with, but now when we're looking at it from a statewide perspective, it's a different kind of strategy in being able to apply resources and make sure that not only all agencies are on point, but that the public is well prepared. And it also gives the ability for state agencies to open up different programs and provide different services that would be maybe bound by regulatory requirements that now can be opened up and be put in place to support individuals that may be impacted by the wildfires that we're dealing with, or possibly impacted by the power shutoffs that have been going on over the last week. That state of emergency will stay in force until it gets rescinded here when the threat passes. Obviously, the governor talked about the two major fires that we're currently dealing with, the Kincaid fire in the north and the Getty fire in the south. And of course, we have millions of Californians that are still dealing with the effects of the power safety power shutoffs. Together, it's complex, but we are working to meet the challenge. There's over 10,000 state agency and local government personnel that have been committed, whether they're on the fire line or they're working in our regional centers, or they're in a state agency or departments that are responding associated with the conditions we're facing, or here in the State Operations Center. My agency's responsibility in the governor's office is coordination of the entire state's response, and that is all happening here in the State Operations Center. The actions here have to be well coordinated, and really the metric that we're trying to move to is to try to get people back into their day-to-day life. In the case of the fires, we want to try to hopefully get people moving back home out of evacuation shelters and be able to move forward. In case of the power shutoffs, working closely with the utilities to maximize their restoration period to buy down the time at which the power's out so that people can get the power back on and move forward. Very, very close coordination, a lot of different entities, both public and private, leveraging our private sector partners in the Grocers Association, in the Fuel and Petroleum Association, et cetera, to telecommunications to make sure that all of those day-to-day needs for public safety remain in place. The governor mentioned FEMA and our partnership. The Federal Emergency Management Agency does have a team that's embedded here now at the State Operations Center. We have been able to successfully have them as part of our planning cell, and the governor's request to the administration to rapidly get fire management assistance grants and apply those to those fires that are taking place really have been done in record time, and that coordination is taking place between the governor and the federal administration, proving to be very, very successful and very supportive to the firefighters on the line, making sure that we have all the resources necessary to get that done. He's also mentioned the firefighters from other states. We have currently 150 different engines from various states in the western U.S., and we've pre-positioned over 100 engines, more than 400 firefighters throughout the state of California strategically. And even in this morning's fire in Getty, that fire initially had 2 pre-positioned strike teams that were right there in the area, immediately dispatched, which helped to keep that fire in a manageable way. So strategically across the board, whether it's in fire service, it's in law enforcement, it's in public health, emergency management, the various sectors, communications, we are leaning as forward as we possibly can to address all of those items. And a lot of this is, like the pre-positioning, really looking at strategically what is happening, what are the conditions, how is the weather changing, and making decisions based upon projections and forecasting. And so it's a different way of doing business than we've done in the past. This isn't reactive. This is proactive. This is out in front. This is really leaning forward to make sure that we can be as many places as we can to keep these fires small and to address other issues related to the weather conditions. So we will continue to keep the State Operations Center and this level of commitment at this level until we can scale back, which we will let you know. I want to reinforce all Californians do need to be cognizant and prepared. This is a partnership. It's not just a government responsibility. This is public and private and non-governmental and faith-based. It's a whole of community, and it's necessary that all of the public also step up, be aware, listen to warnings and alerts. If there's a fire in your area and you're told to evacuate, do not wait, evacuate. This is very, very much important. We want your safety as our #1 priority, and everything else, if something gets lost, can be rebuilt, but your lives can't. So with that, we'll continue to step up to meet the challenge. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Cal Fire, Chief Tom Porter.
Well, thank you. And again, Tom Porter, Cal Fire Fire Chief, and representing the state of California in our wildfire mission. I can't express enough my appreciation for the governor's support. There is nobody here now behind me who has not been more engaged in this medium-high state that we're in, fire-wise. This is our peak of season in the state. This is when We have the most potential for large and damaging fires in California, particularly in the south part of the state. We haven't had rains in the north part of the state, so all of California is in play right now. And knowing that the support is here from all levels of California government, particularly the governor's office, is absolutely important. We are leveraging things that in ways that we usually don't do until we're at high, very high. We have out-of-state engines that we're bringing in proactively to ensure that we have the resources ready to go when we have 300 plus initial attack fires that are happening while we're fighting 2 or 3 major fires at the same time. And so that's what's happening. The Kincaid fire is the largest and most damaging fire that we have currently that we're fighting. Healdsburg and Windsor are very much still in harm's way. But our crews yesterday were able to maintain fire lines, hold the major part of the fire out of the depths of the community in both cases, and are working now to get perimeter control so that we can keep the fire from going to the west side of 101 and release evacuation orders as soon as possible, get people back home. We're also working within the incident to ensure that PG&E has all of the possible access that they need to get the power on, even within the fire area, immediately, as soon as it is safe to do so. So these are the things that we're able to do with this partnership that is happening here at the SOC. What we need to also be aware of is that we're nowhere near done with this. We are going to need to have widespread statewide rain before this is over. And so we're poised to continue this. Thankfully, I've talked with you in the past about the firefighters being worn down. Those scars are still there. And these kind of days bring that feeling back. But we've had enough time this year to be able to recharge, sharpen our tools, be ready for what's happening now. And we are fully capable and ready to respond to all of the state's fire emergencies, plus going through this part of the season. So I want you to feel very confident that the fire service system and the emergency response system is ready for California's emergencies going into the rest of this fire season. And very much thankfully to extending our peak staffing and our 4th firefighter on much of our engines that was added as surge capacity during the middle of season this year by Governor Newsom. So thank you very much.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief. And speaking of response, and I think about 17, 18 minutes, we will have a new website up, culturally competent website available, Spanish, not just English, called response.ca.gov, response.ca.gov. That will be a aggregated site for information about current weather conditions. It will have a number of buttons that we'll be able to attach to small business loans, assistance, support. We'll talk about the details of some of these emergency declarations and allow people in a very friendly customer engagement to be able to access resources in one single site as opposed to trying to figure out the labyrinth that is government bureaucracy. And so response.ca.gov, we encourage people to go to that site. I also want to just make one final point, and that is I could not be more pleased with the local elected officials and their extraordinary response to this moment, both Assembly and Senate leaders, but also city council members and mayors, boards of supervisors. It's just wonderful to row in the same direction. And we were very pleased to get $75 million out this last week, $26 million to counties, 10 specifically to cities, to provide discretionary grants that they can provide real resources in real time. And that's just, again, part of the framework of collaboration that is relatively novel in this state, but I think important to highlight as well. With that, we're happy to answer any questions, and you can ask not just ourselves, but talk to Maribel and our Health and Human Service Director as well, if you wish. But any questions?
Governor, you said in an interview over the weekend that you wanted to see more
I want to see as many people bidding. What I said, and very specifically said, I want as many people bidding for the assets of Pacific Gas and Electric as possible. I couldn't be more clear, including standing right here on 2 separate occasions, not only in my public comments, but on that board right there, put out a report in detail saying that includes municipalization. And that was in our report. It was also in my public comments. We are working with the City and County of San Francisco. I've been talking to Mayor Sam Liccardo. We continue to look for bidders, large and small, all across this country, and he's among many that is in this business. And I just hope more people make a bid for the assets so we have a competitive process moving up into June 30th of next year when we have set the goal and date and mandate for PG&E to get out of bankruptcy.
But given the situation, given their falling stock price, what argument or what case could you make to someone to even?
I just want as many people to look at purchasing the assets. That's a decision for them. I think you're chasing a headline that wasn't necessarily contextualized. We said we want as many bidders. Someone asked, would they be among them? I said, absolutely. I want as many people making a case and bidding for these assets. But I imagine that's the same argument you'd have to ask the people of City and County of San Francisco. The same argument you'd have to ask Sam Liccardo. Same argument you'd have to make to Elliott and the hedge fund that is trying to make a bid, or to those that are trying to seek equity through the shareholders that currently exist in the current board at PG&E. That's a difficult process, but we set up a framework to help aid in them getting out of bankruptcy. That is a substantive answer to your question of what are the procedures and protocols that we put in place that we think not only will help with that process and secure potential bids for the assets, but also help secure some stabilization and ability to get bond ratings that will allow access to capital for the other 2 IOUs in Southern California, SDGE and Edison in LA. So this is a multifaceted challenge. It's not exclusive to PG&E, but we want more people in this space, more people bidding.
I have a couple questions about compensation, but I want to follow up. You brought up municipalization. Is there anything that you can do at the state level to encourage municipalization? Anything you can do to drive down the price that localities would have to pay to buy out their section of the grid?
It's all be determined. We're working in collaboration with the City and County of San Francisco. There were specific procedures and protocols that they reached out to request and support from us. They did that formally and informally, did that in writing, did that verbally and orally, and we responded in a very supportive manner. So the answer is yes, and specifically we have.
That you can do. Okay, so I want to follow up on your compensation point that you continue to hammer on PG&E, saying they need to make people, at least if not whole, compensate them in some fashion for these outages. I've had people tell me, $100 isn't going to pay for a fridge full of food. I've had business owners say I've lost thousands. $250 credit on my bill is like paltry, and
That's correct.
And yet PG&E has balked at this idea at every turn, and now we're looking at 3 different shutoffs. Is there anything you can do to compel them to actually?
We're working with the PUC to do just that. We're looking at the fixed charges on utility bills as one form of potential relief and allowing credits on that. And we're looking at our legal authority in this space, which is more challenging. But we're also looking at our moral authority and doing what we can to assess these costs. Past practices don't necessarily predict the future, but they can instruct our approach to try to advance a different kind of outcome in future. But I'm not naive about this. Is what we think they should do, and the Public Utilities Commission will adjudicate what they legally can do.
So you're not sure they can do it at this point?
I am sure that in the past, based upon not just PG&E, and let's excuse PG&E, the power shutoffs are more common in Southern California than they are in Northern California. They've been more common since 2007 in San Diego Gas and Electric. They do not reimburse for power shutoffs. That's been an industry practice. So that is a past practice from one of the IOUs. PG&E has not been in this position before. We would like them to consider reimbursements, and we're going to be very forceful in advancing that.
Real quick, how about reimbursing the state? We're throwing all kinds of state resources.
We are assessing all of those costs and have been very, very vocal about that, and I can assure you we have been very detailed and copious in collecting those costs.
I had a question for President Batcher, actually.
Thanks.
So PG&E in the PUC's investigation, like if the bankruptcy procedure was going on, PG&E about a week or 2 ago, they asked for all of the investigations against PG&E to be resolved, including cost of capital, including the safety investigation, 2017 fires. the gas records investigation, basically every single thing happening at the PUC. Do you support all of those things being resolved by June 30th as kind of part and parcel with the bankruptcy plan being approved as well by then?
I can't speak specifically to the proceedings. However, we do, as the governor has well described, we are going to get to June 30th with a bankruptcy completed. So I can't speak to the proceeding underway. I'm not allowed to do that, but I understand the question. Thank you.
It's a new day at the Public Utilities Commission, and I can assure you we have the right chair to advance our efforts.
So, two questions. One about the June 30th date. Is there any risk that having this hard and fast date will limit the possibilities for creative solutions on what to do with PG&E and how to handle it and whether to break it up and municipalization and all this stuff? Might that take longer than you have before?
Well, we need to move. End of tyranny or tyranny without end. We need a date. We need specific goals. We need to be transparent, and we need to measure our progress. And I think the sense of deep urgency that people are feeling right now only underscores the importance of meeting that moment. We laid out detailed pathway, what that looks like. And as you recall, that includes commitments to advancing our clean energy goals. It includes commitments to make sure we do our best to hold harmless the community choice aggregators and existing contracts on clean energy. It made commitments to advance our efforts to get closure on the settlements related to the culpability that has been established by PG&E related to the Camp Fire in particular, but other fires that are being adjudicated in real time. All of those things must occur. The utilities broadly were supportive of that timeline, despite the pressures clearly that places on them. And what has occurred in the last few weeks, just to me, underscores the importance of meeting that deadline.
Okay, so you don't sound flexible on that.
Look, we're going to do what we have to do, but we're going to be look, the law is the law. That's what specifically the date that is in there, June 30th, 2020, in order to access a series of valves that would help them help themselves. It is in absolutely their interest to create the conditions, and they've got 9 months to do so, to advance those settlements and to continue the work that they need to do to invest in public safety and reliability in the process.
So as a follow-up, you said it's a new day at the PUC. So are the problems we're seeing right now, I mean, is the PUC to blame? Have they not done enough to hold the utilities?
Well, I think there's a long list of finger pointing. I've been very clear and precise in some of my criticism, but I've also extended that to oversight. I got here 9 months ago, not 19 years ago, not even 9 years ago. We own this. I own my decision to appoint 2 members of the PUC. I'm pleased with both appointments. We have a new chair, and she is tough-minded, resolved, and has got an incredible track record. And she's going to hold them accountable. I have all the confidence in the world. I won't speak to the past of the Public Utilities Commission, except to say we didn't meet previous 2 decades. And so that's on everybody. And Mother Nature, forgive me, has also joined the conversation in a way where she was not as engaged in the past. And as you know, she bats last, she bats 1,000. She's chemistry, physics, and biology. And she has been ferocious in 5-year drought, historic rain year, and has created and exacerbated these conditions. This is the reality. We own it. We need to fix it.
Governor Newsom, I also wanted to ask about the Paradise area lawmakers' proposal this morning. This hasn't been codified, of course, into like a bill, but I wanted to ask about their proposal to basically put a pause on the RPS and transfer that, like utility spending in that area towards fire efforts.
Well, we'll take a look at it when we learn more about it. But the spirit of a hyper laser-like focus on public safety, I absolutely embrace. And that's the kind of accountability that we look forward to at the Public Utilities Commission, and a prioritization of public safety improvements. And so that spirit I embrace, but I don't know the details of what they're proposing. Forgive me.
I know you've mentioned repeatedly over the last few weeks AB 1054 and leaving things up, to the bankruptcy proceedings to reshape are there other concrete things that you are either looking for from the legislature or looking to propose moving forward to, you know, get in sooner on, or even through the bankruptcy process, I guess, to reshape and change PG&E? And is there any need for a emergency session or special session to do any of that?
I want to fulfill all the commitments we made that are in process, and they're significant. I'll repeat them. You opened it up. I'm going to repeat them. The utilities have to invest $5 billion in public safety improvements. The utilities have to add a member of their board of directors that's focused on public safety. Their compensation, not only for the executives, their management is now tied to public safety. The PUC has to build a team, anywhere from 35 to 40 individuals. They've already hired the director that would focus exclusively on wildfire mitigation planning. It's a new division of safety under the PUC. That has to be done by January 1st. There's an advisory committee that complements that effort that will bring in the kind of resources and resourcefulness that is needed at this moment to look at new technologies and looking at new and best and novel practices on public safety and modernizing the grid, hardening the grid, and making it more reliable and safer. We will hold ourselves to all of those provisions, hold ourselves to account. But the thing I want to see with earnest and intensity right now is what is being advanced independently by the PUC chair and her colleagues, and that is a major investigation specifically into PSPS. We don't need to wait for anyone to tell us to do that. That is underway. That process is unfolding in real time. It already was opened up, and now it is being advanced in earnest. So that's where we are. And to the extent more is needed, we will continue to pursue that. But I will say we put $1 billion in the budget to focus on pre-positioning of assets, to focus on fire mitigation, vegetation management, forest management, new assets and procurement for AI and LiDAR and radar technologies, prescriptive technologies, analytic technologies. We need to invest those dollars in real time. So all of this is underway. All of this was anticipated, including the money we put in the budget early part of the year, $50 million of grants for emergency planning at the local level, the $75 million that we put in anticipation of PSPS that now is just being distributed, and the 911 investments that we put in the budget that need to invest. So it's about implementation. It's not always about the novel. It's about implementing the commitments we've made with assurance that we're going to be accountable to hitting on all of those goals. And I will remind you of your own reporting. And I'll remind you that those reports are online, and we tag them on every single press release. And I would encourage you to open the links and look through the detailed prescriptive plan that we set out to not only meet this moment, but to work through this moment so we don't have to continue to be at this moment into the future.
Governor, I just had a quick clarifying question about this major investigation looking into PSPS. So is that an extension of the existing PUC rulemaking?
Let's get Maribel back up here. Yeah.
Or is it a separate one?
It will be included in an open proceeding that's already underway.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Governor, another thing that 1054 did was allow utilities to earn a certificate that would sort of ease their liability for starting wildfires if they can demonstrate to the PUC that they're a safe operator. My understanding is PG&E already has its first certificate under 1054. How do you square that with the fact we've got Cal Fire tape around one of their towers right now for this Kincaid fire?
Well, they have annual certification, safety certification that is required, and PUC can talk to that process, but we're putting this advisory committee up. We're putting the new safety division up. All of that happens in January, and that will create a protocol, a completely different protocol than the one that exists today. I don't know, Maribel, you want to?
Well, there also our safety and enforcement division in collaboration with Cal Fire. We investigate incidences. And that investigation, our investigators are already out on the lines looking at those.
I understand. To some people, they're going to see that we've got a state seal of approval that you're one of the safe operators, and right now they're being looked at as the cause of this fire.
Yeah, well, we're doubling down on this, and you can look to the specifics of our legislation and what's going in place in January, and it is a completely new day. Anybody else?
So is there any?
I mean, there's always more we can do. I mean, look, it's going to take, it took decades to get here. decades of forest mismanagement, suppression strategies that actually have exacerbated conditions in some of our forests, lack of federal investment in 57% of the land that's under federal jurisdiction, a federal government that's cutting their forestry budget. It has been over the last few years as they moralize about California's lack of leadership in this space. We put an historic amount of money in this space, but that's just a down payment. It will take years and years to kind of do the work we need to do to prepare and make sure we're more resilient. But the biggest and most stubborn reality is these utilities. And they have to modernize their equipment, and we've got to get this thing through bankruptcy and come out the other side as a completely reimagined operation that's more resilient and more safety focused. And I think we've got the protocols and procedures in place to do that, and now we just have to implement. But again, it's not a video game. It's not a computer program. It's life. It's organic. And things take shape. And it's not a linear life. And we will respond in real time, and we will adjust in real time. We'll deal with changing conditions. But I hope you can objectively look at the last 9 months. And there's not a week that's gone by. Quite literally, I would challenge you, not a week that's gone by where there hasn't been a sequential announcement committing, resolving to address this issue head on, to anticipate the moment, to lean into the moment, to hold folks to account that we never have had before. I could be held to account for the last 9 months, and I assure you, if I'm privileged to be here for a four-year term, you're going to see a hell of a lot more being done. You're going to see much more accountability, and if I don't see real things take shape, we're going to get new folks in that can actually do that job. But I think we've got the right team. We've got the right path and plan, and now we've got to execute, and that's on us.
Changing where homes could be built. Is that
Well, you can't get rid of 4.5 million homes. I want to remind folks of this. There are 4.5 million homes that already have been built in the WUI. 11 million Californians live in these, so we can moralize saying, what the hell did you think when you built that, grandma built that home 100 years ago? What was she thinking? She didn't anticipate climate change. She didn't anticipate that our forest management may have changed. We've got to just protect these folks. I think there's a, and by the way, as you know, because you were here, you remember the details, I hope. I encourage you to take a look at the links, look at our plan. We were explicit about moving forward and including in general plans consideration around issues of land use in and around the WUI as it relates to new construction and new planning into the future, land use planning and local decision-making as it relates to addressing the new realities of climate change and the vulnerabilities in and around these forested areas. And so that is something else that we've been aggressive about and we're proactive about, and that also needs to be considered as well. And as you may recall, we had a summit. Not everybody joined us, but we had a wonderful summit in June sharing these best practices with local leaders all up and down the state. We held it at the Sheraton in Sacramento. Was very proud of that summit. It was the first time the state had ever convened experts in this space, including land use. And we had a number of sessions sharing best practices in this space as well. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Actually, the last one.
Okay, thank
your thoughts on your name and Dre Davis's name
Yeah.
making it into some?
Yeah, I'll leave that to you guys. I appreciate everybody. Thank you.